few years ago, I was reading an interview with James Lovelock, who first articulated the Gaia thesis that the Earth is a self-regulating organism. And Lovelock, quite frankly, thinks that we're too stupid. Lovelock said something that I found very interesting beyond that, because I think in some ways he's fundamentally wrong. He was interviewed in 2008, and at that time he said that he thought we lived in a period that was exactly like 1938 and 1939. And to quote him, he said, "We all knew something terrible was going to happen, but didn't know what to do about it." My own perspective is that humans learn from history, and we know we should have prevented the genocide that occurred during World War II. And some people have been very vigorous in asserting that ever since. We now know something, and we know what to do about it, and that is we need to end ecocide. So I applaud all of you who've been involved in this initiative, because it is exactly what we need to do. I have been working to try to get the international peace research and peace studies communities to focus on this issue, because it is now, in my opinion, even more threatening than the threat that we face from the potential for nuclear war. You see, I thought for years that the basic problem that humanity faced was warfare, including, of course, the potential for nuclear war. And as an academic, I had become very involved in the international peace research and peace studies communities. And it seemed to me when I first met Polly Higgins that what was very clear to me was that we weren't just at war with other humans, other members of our own species, but that in fact we were at war with other species, quite fundamentally. Given the reports we now know of, we're wiping out species at quite a rapid rate. But we're also at war with the planet itself, and we have to stop. And so one of my concerns is to bring ecocide to the center of peace studies and peace research, so that we really get people who are concerned with how we're living on the planet focused on these issues. Well, back about 7 or 8 years ago, I was asked to create an online course that links students in different parts of the world focused on environmental issues. We really wanted to look at how humans were living on the planet, the fact that it wasn't sustainable, and what we might do about it. So I created a course that began to link, I think the maximum we had was about 100 students from about, probably at this point, about 20 different countries, discussing the way in which we were living, the fact that our economic system tended to externalize costs to the environment, that consumerism was a part of the problem, and to think about how we might transform the way we're living so that we could, in fact, be at peace with the planet. Well, one of the things I was going to mention this afternoon is the comment that Richard Falk, who Damien Short mentioned this morning, and that was Richard was at a conference in Budapest that I attended last November, and he mentioned that the big challenge we faced was to develop a species consciousness. No more of these other identities, to transcend them really and understand that we are all one species, humanity on this planet. And so ecocide, it seems to me, is a very important step in the direction of making people conscious that they are a species on this planet and that we have to live in harmony with the other species and the planet itself. So I've been very impressed with the work that Priska Mertz and her colleagues have been doing here in Europe, but I have to say I think a lot has to be done in North America and in other parts of the world. We should be having the Japanese and the Chinese and others much more involved in these kinds of issues than it is current. I think the big problem is almost a kind of willful ignorance. People have not wanted to face up to the problems that the environment has begun to bite back, really, at people. I think finally people are beginning to understand that extreme weather events and other phenomena are really something they have to deal with, and that their behavior as a species on this planet is implicated in that. And that has to become more widely spread. So I think education is central to this. And at one level of analysis, you could say that the Ecocide project is in fact an educational project. If one frames it in a certain way, one should see that the real change has to come from below. It will not come from above because of the complicity between much of the political leadership in the world and the corporate leadership, which is heavily invested in the infrastructure that, in particular, that brings about lots of CO2 emissions, and we're talking about the carbon-based companies. And that complicity is such that it's a major obstacle to change, and the only way it will change is from the bottom. The divestment campaigns are now a very interesting part of the challenge to those at the top. The international political community, to the extent that it becomes responsive to citizens around these issues, I think absolutely has a role to play. But they often want to look the other way because they have more substantial relationships with people with power and money. The key to ecocide is to live in harmony with other species and the planet. Ultimately, ecocide means we're not doing that, and we want to eliminate ecocide in the same manner that we have worked to eliminate genocide.